because we're jointly assigned with other bills. All right. It is 1:02. We try to start on time. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to bill hearings for the House Health and Government Operations Committee. I'm your Chairman, Jocelyn Peña-Melnick, and with me, my Vice Chair, Bonnie Collison, Delegate Collison to the left. I kindly ask for your patience. I'm going to go through some of the rules. If we encounter any technical or streaming issues, please set your electronic devices to vibrate. I'm going to do that right now because I don't want to be embarrassed. As well as a reminder, there's no food or drink allowed in the gallery because our staff would have to clean it. And for us, you will see us with drinks only because we sit here for 5, 6, 7 hours sometimes, and we need to keep hydrated. Otherwise, there will be no delegates the next day because we'll all be sick. For each bill, we're going to hear from the bill sponsor and the sponsor panel, followed by an all-person witnesses. So it goes favorable, favorable with amendment, and unfavorable. And then all virtual witnesses will go after the people that are here. I will alternate panels, favorable and unfavorable, to give everyone a fair chance of being heard. So sometimes we have 30 favorable and 5 unfavorable. I will try to be fair and call them early on as well. The bill sponsor testimony in this committee is not limited. However, please don't abuse it because we have, like today, I believe we have at least 10 bill hearings. All the other witnesses will have 2 minutes to provide testimony. A timer is displayed on the screen and the sound will play when your time has expired. If you hear it expire, please be kind and wrap it up. Don't make me have to do it, all right? Please adhere to our usual committee rules for my wonderful teammates and colleagues of 1 question and 1 answer, and please keep your question brief. I want to take a second to say I know we're going to get very busy as we move on a lot of bill hearings and a lot of voting and subcommittee work. And I want to thank you in advance and thank you for coming on time. Members of the public will be able to view the live stream of this hearing on the Maryland General Assembly website and the YouTube channel. Today, we will hear the bills in the following order. And please keep in mind that I may sometimes have to move them depending on whether you will see that some of the members come and go because we also have hearings in other committees, but we do have access to the recording, so we will watch it. So today's first one will be House Bill 581. And we have House Bill 598, 617, 594, 566, 756, 394, 712, House Bill 499, and the last bill of the day, House Bill 786. So keep in mind that I may change it depending if I don't see the delegate or the senator in here. First, we're going to start with House Bill 581, State Government Permits, Licenses, and Certificates Processing Transparent Government Act of 2024. If you will be so kind and come up and give testimony and bring your panel up, please. The next one. Good afternoon. How are you? And who wants to go first? Who's the lucky person?
I'll go first, Madam Chair.
All right.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Health Government Operations Committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify on behalf of Governor's Bill, House Bill 581, State Government Permits, Licenses, and Certificate Processing, the Transparent Government Act of 2024. For the record, my name is Saif Ratul. I'm the Deputy Legislative Officer for Governor Westmore. So the first year of the Moore-Miller administration, there's been an economic success story for Maryland. We were able to create tens of thousands of jobs, experience the lowest unemployment rate in the nation, and secure significant federal funding and investment for a number of different projects across the state. As the governor said in his State of the State, we have done this with the partnership of leaders and stakeholders across the state, and a lot of you are sitting here in this committee today. However, the past decade tells a different story for the state. Maryland's economic growth has underperformed the country, and Marylanders from Oakland to Crisfield and everyone in between have experienced that effect. The unpredictable nature of Maryland's current licensing and permitting process has been a source of frustration for many businesses, developers, and employees alike. And furthermore, it prevents a lot of businesses from investing in this current state. And unfortunately, this story is not just unique to Maryland. We have seen it in a number of different states. And a lot of the states across the country and across various political spectrum have taken a number of actions to streamline that processes. So the governor's proposal that is in front of us today is aimed to enhance Maryland's economic competitiveness and benefit all Marylanders. So I will go over a few of the key part of the bill. So first, the bill requires each principal department and independent units of the government to create a catalog of each type of permits, licenses, and certificates that it issues. That catalog will include a number of different topics, such as descriptions of each permit, licenses, and certificates, the statutory or regulatory authority that authorizes department or independent units to issue as such, establishes a timeline for processing and issuing, the fee that is required for each of those permits, certificates, and licenses, any criminal history requirement for the applicants, and any recommended steps that could expedite the processing timeline. Second, the bill requires each department and independent units to post on its website a description of the application process, any updates on the process in the last 12-month period, and the time to process such applications type for public consumption. And then the third, this bill will establish a government efficiency commission. The purpose for this commission is simple: review the catalogs and the reports, review any statutory or regulatory provisions that may impact efficiency in processing timelines, and make any recommendations needed to remove barriers and improve the entirety of the process. To simplify the process further, the administration offered several technical amendments. The purpose for those technical amendments are to provide flexibility in the process and the timeline for agencies and units to compile the required reports based on their findings, and to include the Secretary of Information Technology on their designee to be a part of the commission to share crucial feedback as the state progresses in streamlining this effort. To simply put, the bill aims to identify the specific obstacles that various agencies and independent units are facing in terms of meeting their permit requirements and work together to find solutions that will help Maryland. With that, I respectfully request a favorable committee report, and I look forward to working with the members in this committee for any additional and potential amendment. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who is next?
Well, next, great. Good afternoon, Chair Pena-Melnick and Vice Chair Cullison and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Kevin Anderson, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce. I'm here in support of HB 581 and concur with the testimony of the administration. Very quickly, I just want to emphasize that making permitting and licensing processes more transparent and predictable will be a huge help to small businesses and entrepreneurs across the state of Maryland. Small and early stage businesses face so much uncertainty as they launch and grow. Anything we do in government, we can do to make these processes smoother and help make them more informed and plans decisions is a good thing. The more information these businesses have, the more likely they are to succeed and to thrive. And the less time and energy they need to spend on permitting and licensing processes, the more time they can devote to growing their businesses. The Government Efficiency Commission created in this bill would also look for places to streamline and reduce timelines for these processes. This aligns with the recent recommendation submitted by the Maryland Economic Council. I urge a favorable report on HB 581. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Who's next, please?
I'll go next. Good afternoon, Chair Pena Melnick and members of the committee. My name is Mary Kane, and I am the president of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of the Maryland Chamber and the Maryland Economic Council, I am here to convey our support for HB 581, which takes a crucial first step in streamlining Maryland's regulatory process so business can grow and thrive. As president of the Chamber, I represent 6,800 businesses in Maryland, and our mission is to advance inclusive partnerships for a Maryland where all businesses and their communities thrive. In order to achieve this mission, we need to know where we stand competitively in relation to other states. And as we analyze public data, which you can find in our Red Book, which we will be happy to deliver to any of you, it was apparent that we are not at all business friendly. In fact, I recently visited a potential member who started their business in Maryland in the early 1900s. They relayed to me that last year they changed their whole business strategy from focusing 100% of their growth in Maryland to focusing only 50% of their growth in Maryland. Of course, I asked why such a drastic change, and they replied with one example of their many frustrations with Maryland's regulatory system. In Tennessee, they were able to begin their project, go through all the local and state regulations needed to approve their project, and were up and running within the year. In Maryland, they are still waiting for multiple approvals on a similar project, and it has been 7 years. I would like to thank Governor Moore for appointing me to the Maryland Economic Council. He established this council last year to provide analysis and recommendations for implementing economic policies that achieve growth. And specifically, we always fall consistently at the bottom of when it comes to business friendliness and regulatory environments. In fact, we are at 47th in the nation. So this hostile business environment creates a meaningful drag on productivity, hampering the ability of Maryland entrepreneurs to bring their ideas to market in Maryland. And it also weakens which dissuades businesses from locating here and disproportionately harms small and economically disadvantaged businesses by creating a business environment that requires significant resources and knowledge to navigate. For this reasons, we support a favorable report from this committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Pena Melnick, Vice Chair Collison, and members of the committee. My name is Reza Jafari, a member of the Maryland Economic Council. We testify today in support of House Bill 581, the Transparent Government Act, which takes an utterly crucial first step in streamlining Maryland's regulatory process so businesses can grow and thrive. As you heard, Governor Moore established the Maryland Economic Council in 2023 to provide analysis and recommendations for implementing economic policies that achieve growth, diversify our workforce, and merge our state's assets and growing industries. Our mission includes identifying and tracking underlying economic factors that impact Maryland's business climate, evaluating Maryland's regulatory environment and economic policies compared to competing states, and analyzing Maryland's economic strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. Through our research, we identified Maryland's disjointed and antiquated regulatory environment as one of the top hindrances to our state's economic success. In our first set of recommendations to Governor Moore, they highlighted the need for streamlining the state's regulatory environment. This legislation is an important first step in addressing this critical challenge by requiring state agencies to catalog and assess each regulation it administers, and by establishing and publicizing expectations for when licensing and permitting applications are to be returned. The Moore administration is injecting accountability into Maryland government. This catalog and data will be vital to achieving the administration's stated goal of streamlining Maryland's regulatory processes, and will allow them to do so in a way that ensures business receives timely and clear guidance without eliminating necessary regulations. Regulatory reform is essential if Maryland is to foster a business-friendly environment, attract investment, enhance its reputation, and create a transparent and efficient regulatory framework, ultimately contributing to our success. For these reasons, we support the legislation and respectfully urge a favorable support. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for your service. We really appreciate it. We're going to open it up now for questions of the committee. I see Delegate Chisholm.
Sure.
My
And thank you
pleasure.
for bringing this bill safe. I know you and I talked about this the other day, and I think it's a great bill if it goes into effect the way we would hope. But my question is, and we didn't talk about it, but how much engagement is planned for bringing people in from the private sector to help to facilitate and create more of the efficiency? Sometimes because the private sector knows how to instill urgency into things, whereas sometimes government bureaucratic processes do not. And I also ask that because I know that a lot of times when you're applying for a permit, there's several agencies or departments you have to go through, and oftentimes they blame one another and say, hey, we're waiting on MDE, and MDE saying, no, we're waiting on this. How do you see it, I guess, in the perfect model with being able to create efficiency and not allowing departments to blame one another, but to really to bring about the goal that we're all looking for and make Maryland business friendlier and also be able to streamline some of this?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Delegate, for the question. And that is an important one, right? So one of the key part of this bill is looking at the government's efficiency commission, right? It will house a number of different secretaries from a number of different agencies to streamline the process. And ever since Moore Miller administration has came on, something that the governor has consistently have done, not only just talking about partnership in public with General Assembly members, but partnership and collaboration within different agencies and administrations, right? And the secretary could speak for this a little bit more too, that, we have this cabinet meetings and retreats every month to showcase some of the challenges that each agencies are facing, what are the ways that we can streamline the process. So the commission serves a key component for us to do a lot of those internal dialogue in a meaningful way, but also the commission houses a number of members from the external entities as well, the business communities as well, because you are absolutely right? We cannot just sit at the State House and come up with solutions and assume they will, work for everybody, that peanut butter approach. We need to have those input from everyone on the members, especially on the business communities on day-to-day level that are submitting those applications, going through the burdensome work to get all this information necessary and then applying for them, right? So that's the purpose of this commission. And I would love to hear more thoughtful ideas from the committee here in terms of the way we can amplify that work. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just curious, what's the peanut butter approach? Because I don't like peanut butter. What is it?
Madam Chair, peanut butter kept me, survived me through the college. So I can speak no ill about that. It was cheap and affordable.
I have to tell you, my puppy loves it, but I don't like it. Delegate Shalega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here. So I'm looking at Maryland One Stop. Do you plan on continuing that? I mean, I'm pulled up here. I hearken back to not long ago when taxpayers funded this other effort. I hope you're not scrapping it and rebuild, or just if you can let us know what you're doing, because taxpayers just can't keep paying for new product programs that promise to help. I'm a small business owner. Yesterday, I called the comptroller's office I got a letter saying, if you have questions about XYZ, to my business, call this number. And I called the number and it said, I'm sorry, we're too busy to answer the phone. Try back later. So give us a little info on how you're going to build on what the Hogan administration did, or whether you're just scrapping that completely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delegate. So, a member on one of our amendment is to include the Secretary of Information Technology or their designee, a part of the commission, right? Because we understand that a lot of our agencies could face significant cyber challenges, right? Especially with our existing infrastructure. So the secretary will play a crucial role in terms of elevating the need for us to streamline a lot of those processes, but also look at the centralized process as well. Delegate Chisholm mentioned this, that for some of the specific permits, right, there's a number of different requirements or application process for multiple different agencies or independent units. The initial purpose for One Stop was to streamline that process, so I, as a business owner, don't have to fill out 79 different applications, but I could go there and provide that information, and it can streamline the process. So we'll have significant conversations around that. Frankly speaking, that's what the commission will play a major and critical component in the role. Also noting that some of our other agencies have different portals other than One Stop, right? For example, the Department of Health, they have a different portal as well. And our goal is to have those conversations and identify what are the best practices and what are the tools that we have at our disposal in terms of streamlining this good governance and transparent approach for everybody.
Thank you. Delegate Gazoni, followed by Delegate Bandari.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
My pleasure.
I think my question is in sort of a similar space, but it's sort of, I chunk things out a little differently than many people probably. So I'm curious if you have a sense of, within the larger scope of this, how much of it you're looking at actually changing sort of the content, like actually changing regulations, and how much of it is more in process, which is probably a little bit more in the IT data management space. And then of course, the sort of wild card of everything, how are personnel going to be reacting to this in places where maybe there's not enough, or people that aren't as savvy possibly with the technology as they need to be, that sort of thing. So sort of those three buckets, what's the balance of it?
Right, and that's a very important aspect for us to continue to have that conversation. Hence, the commission will play a significant role in terms of finding where is our biggest gaps in management and identify where we could do a little bit more, either the regulatory or statutory aspects. In this bill, the goal is simply to pursue a fact-finding mission, right? Instead of prescribing what to do for every agencies, right? There are some agencies that have done something differently and independently that works, but because they've worked in silo for a number of years, right? So our goal is to streamline that process. Our goal is to have those best practices that can create an environment that is friendly to growth for business, growth for our economic competitiveness here in Maryland, and as a number of our panel have mentioned, to make it much better for Marylanders and businesses in Maryland.
Delegate Bandari.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Mr. Secretary, in your testimony, you highlighted the significant benefits of enhancing transparency and accessibility in permitting and licensing processes, and which absolutely aims to streamline operation that reduce cost for businesses, and that will foster economic growth and job creation. Can you share your institutional wisdom? What factors contributed to this approach not being in priority, number one, in the past? And how can we ensure it remains a key focus moving forward without any challenges?
Sure. Thanks so much. And for my institutional wisdom, I'll give it a great shot. Yeah, the bill is designed to establish one, predictability, and also a very clear situation for timeliness for businesses, for civil engineering firms, for construction firms, for any businesses that have to work on an operating scale in terms of turning around projects and efficiency. Predictability is most important. Our reputation in the region and our reputation in the country is one of not being business friendly, and also one of taking a lot of time. To Delegate Gazzoni's question, we've done some analyses or have some information. There are other jurisdictions that have more people than we do in certain processes. Sometimes they have less regulation. So as we begin to put the process in place, we'll be able to get very, very clear feedback, especially from the private sector, about where we need to beef up, where we probably need to address some regulatory schemes, and where we need to make sure that we continue being a very, very strong state in terms of our clean energy goals, in terms of managing our environment and managing our infrastructure, but at the same time being very, very attractive to businesses. In the space of, hard things like stormwater permits, things like making sure that we get through entitlement processes through our departments of agriculture, our departments of the environment, the Department of Commerce, all of us. We have a commerce sub-cabinet, and that's where we're going to do the hard work. And the interaction will happen there. And then when we get the feedback, we'll know, why is it taking 14 months to get a permit done? Is it because, there's a 30 or 60-day turnaround period, and maybe we're taking 48 days to something that we could answer in 2 days? Maybe it's a volleyball match between two agencies where we need to just be able to communicate and work better, where we're still, volleyballing the timelines and volleyballing the issues while we're costing our businesses a hell of a lot of money and maybe looking for other places to work. So not to go on, hopefully that gives you some feedback about what we want to accomplish in the space of making us very, very competitive and also very, very attractive in helping our small businesses and our entire, business infrastructure grow.
Thank you. Thank you. Delegate Taveras, followed by Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
In looking at this bill, I think that this is a great idea. My concern really lies in really the area of fraud with regards to the fact that a lot of businesses, small businesses, are being targeted for fraudulent payment, a letter of good standing, and a slew of other information that arrive at their place of business, or wherever the resident agent is. And I know that at least in some of the websites, there's notifications basically saying, oh, don't be careful of scams, but there's no real details with regards to what does that scam look like? Where would that potential scam come from? There's no real guidance for individuals that may be new in establishing a business to protect them from inappropriately sending checks to people who are just confiscating their money.
Yeah, Delegate, happy to have that conversation a little bit more. To be honest, our process is to make the government, especially the permitting, certificate, and license process simpler for businesses, but the area of fraud is a crucial one, right? And that's where the commission could come up with some solutions as well, talking to a lot of the small businesses that are plagued by it. And to be honest, the other part is the idea of fraud, right, has consistently evolved over the course of time. Whether in the past it was a phone call, calling the grandmas and asking them, or grandparents and asking or telling them your grandchild is in an accident, you must send $1,000 to this account now, right? To the most modern one is that they're sending you an email that looks like maybe coming in from, a very credible source, right? And we just click one link and it's able to get a lot of those information. So I think the commission will have to address and wrestle with that challenge as the technology consistently evolves. And, I am not an expert on that, but I can assure you that our Secretary of Information Technology will have a lot to share on that part.
They're letters. This is not necessarily technology. This is not IT driven. These are letters people are receiving. Because I've received them. I'm just letting you know. I can bring you a sample. So I don't know if you would include it here, but also with regards to this particular issue, I also think that there are people out there that are charging tens of thousands of dollars to acquire permitting licenses and certificates that people can basically just go online and do that at a very minimal cost. So those are two areas that I think you should consider.
I would love to talk to you more about that.
All right. Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, panel, for bringing this bill. Adding to our reputation of not being very friendly state for businesses, A lot of that comes from the local level, their permitting process and delays. So do we have any county or municipal partners on the commission so we can include them in the conversation?
That's a very valid question. And, I'll share this and I'll pass the question to the team here. The purpose for this particular bill is looking at it from the state level. Hence the goal and the target is for state agencies and a lot of the independent units and identify truly what are the biggest challenges, right? And what way we can solve this. We would be able to find a lot of those templates through this process that could be streamlined for local level as well. But the purpose at this moment and the bill in front of us is to look at the statewide perspective first rather than going more granular.
And we have a
Okay.
rule here, so you're only allowed to answer it. Once, we do have Delegate Woods, go ahead. But you can give the information offline, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you. Delegate Woods.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So mine is kind of on the flip side of Delegate Tavares' question. My question becomes not so much how, the phishing scams that impact the consumer, but is there not some sort of a technological advancement that can be used as a hub to intersect those agencies that you're talking about that have to cross over to get information from each other? Is there not a technological hub that could be used so that the information can be fed and everybody that needed parts of that information could draw from it to help reduce some of those massive timeframes that are causing barriers to
Who
expedite?
is the best person to answer that question? You can decide them on each other.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I can give you some insight. Yeah, the state level influence will be able to work closely with our, local and county partners, as we always do, to try to make sure there's a central space to communicate with small businesses. The answer to your question is yes, there is one. We'll be chasing one to make sure we make it most effective to communicate and pick off all of the phishing opportunities. Really, really competitive, space out there. And I think, when we continue to work and tweak, all of our opportunities that we have to get the thread through them all, I think we'll be a lot more effective, and especially at just kind of making sure we communicate at the local level, if that's helpful. But thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the secretary and for this panel? Seeing none, I want to thank you for being so flexible and patient as we ask the questions. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
whatever was required, if you could give it requested to the whole committee. And this actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 581. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day. I see our former colleague there sitting in the corner. Former Delegate Lukey, how are you? Nice to see you. Next, we have House Bill 598, Delegate Boafo, Discrimination, Military Status Prohibition. Will you be so kind and come up with David Dragix and Secretary Woods, I believe? And do you have anyone else? I think that's it.
Chair.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Who will you get started?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, colleagues on the Health and Government Operations Committee. For the record, Delegate Adrian Boafo here to present House Bill 598, Discrimination, Military Status Prohibition.
Is this your first time here?
This is my first time in the committee.
Welcome to our committee.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm
Thank you so
sure the
much.
Committee won't have any questions.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. This bill will ensure that our service members and their families are not disadvantaged because of their desire to serve our nation. HB 598 includes veterans, active duty personnel, and their families as a protected class to protect them from discrimination in education, employment, housing, health and medical services, and human rights.
Thank you.
The need for this legislation is underscored by the unfortunate, overwhelming data that shows that the discrimination experienced by service members, military spouses, and dependents due to their military affiliation happens far too often here in the state and across the country. Governor Moore has declared 2024 as the year for military families in Maryland. And I'm proud that the Moore Miller administration has included this bill in the legislative package, which will support Maryland's veterans, active duty personnel, military spouses, and dependents. And with that, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, thank you for welcoming me to the committee formally, and I'll yield to the Secretary.
Actually, good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good. Well,
Thank you, Madam
welcome to
Chair.
our committee and give us your testimony.
Thank you. And before I begin, Madam Chair, you sent me away with a homework assignment from the last one on HB 431. I just want to let you know we were very much working on that and we'll respond with the letter you've requested.
Thank you very much. People
you.
get homework in this committee.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Chair Pena-Melnick, Vice Chair Cullison, and members of the committee, thank you so much. For the record, my name is Tony Woods, and I serve as the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm here to ask for a favorable report on HB 598, which would ensure that military status is a protected class and our veterans, service members, and their families cannot be discriminated against. We believe this bill is necessary to protect members of the military community from bias or discrimination, particularly in employment, education, and housing. In various Department of Defense surveys, military spouses and families have reported negative experiences because of their service members' military affiliation. Sadly, much of the discrimination faced by veterans, service members, and their families stems from negative stereotypes surrounding post-traumatic stress, unfounded fears of deployments or moves, and other misconceptions regarding military life. Although Maryland's anti-discrimination laws protect against discrimination in education, employment, housing, public accommodations, lending, insurance, health services, and civil rights, these protections do not currently apply to individuals based on military-connected status. We believe that for the military community to thrive here in Maryland, we must ensure that they are not negatively impacted by bias or harmful stereotypes. This bill is also in keeping with Governor Moore's pledge to make 2024 a year for military families, as it will provide protections for military spouses who may be denied jobs or opportunities for career advancement simply because they are married to a service member and are likely to move. Chronically high military spouse unemployment rates create economic instability and food insecurity for military families, and the negative effect on retention and readiness make this issue a matter of national security. It's for these reasons that I respectfully ask the committee for a favorable report on HB 598. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for your testimony. Who's next, please? Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Pena-Melnick, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Delegate Boaffo's bill. I'm Dave Dragic, a retired Army Colonel and Legislative Director of the Maryland Military Coalition, representing over 150,000 uniformed services connected individuals, including military retirees. This legislation will align the Maryland Code with the Department of Defense's goal of ensuring that service members and families are protected through a state's anti-discrimination measures that protect against bias and discrimination in such matters as employment, housing, education, public utilities, and civil rights laws to supplement employment protections under the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act of 1994, or USERRA. Adding military status as a class protected in these and other areas is also a major 2024 legislative objective of the DoD's Military State Policy Program. And as the Secretary has mentioned, it supports the Year of the Military Family. Of particular note, this legislation, in amending the various sections of the state code, sets the standard for the definition of military status in the code through the use of the definition of uniformed services in 10 U.S. Code Section 101, the reserves as defined in 10 U.S. Code Section 10101, a veteran as defined in 30 U.S. Code Section 101, Para 2, and a dependent as defined in 50 U.S. Code Section 3911, Para 4. The coalition encourages and endorses the use of these definitions in all related legislation for the sake of consistency and the benefit of all Maryland residents who are either members of the uniformed services or the reserves or a veteran or a dependent. So the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports HB 598 and asks for a favorable report from the committee. We would like to thank Delegate Boaffo for sponsoring this legislation and appreciate his leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I open it up for questions, I want to ask one question myself. Have you seen Delegate Boaffo, the Maryland Realtors letter?
Yes.
And they said there that currently our members have noted that they often provided favorable treatment of military applicants by waiving rental application fees or by loosening credit or deposit requirements for members of the military. Were military status to be made a protected class, they're concerned that they will no longer be able to offer specialized services or beneficial treatment to members of the military. Is this a concern to you, or have you discussed it with them?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. We have discussed it with the Realtors. We've also chatted with the Attorney General's office and with DLS as well. We believe that the programs that they offer can continue to offer, right? This is just protecting, creating that protective status. So we've let the Realtors know that. Initially, we thought we were going to have to do an amendment on this on the Senate side to address their concerns, but hearing from the Attorney General, we heard otherwise. They can continue with the programs that they're currently using to attract military families or incentivize them for housing.
So did you get a letter?
No, from the Attorney General's
Yes.
office. I do not believe we did. Probably have an email that we can.
Can you
forward
get
you.
that? Can you make
Yeah.
sure that our council gets it, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this panel? That's what we do for new people here. But there is a real question.
Yes.
And that is
It's
Delegate
also
Kerr.
terrifying for me. Thank you.
I thought we were getting out of here. Good.
You couldn't get off that easy. Just to follow up on the point that the chairman was making. If this prevents discrimination based on military status, does it also mean it prevents discrimination on non-military status?
You want to rephrase that question, Delegate?
If you can't discriminate against someone because they are active duty military,
Mhm.
can you conversely not discriminate against someone because they are not active duty military?
I don't know the answer to that, Delegate Kerr. What I will say is that there is a host of protected classes that exist in statute and in the code, and those are the folks who are protected by state law in the most protected ways. I can get back to you with an answer on that in particular, but I don't think so. But I don't want to give you a false answer here.
Delegate Kerr, do you have a follow-up to the secretary and see if he
Just-
can assist?
Oh, Mr. Secretary, perhaps you would like to weigh in on that question.
We'd be delighted to take on that homework assignment. Yes,
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. I will say that I'm looking at the Realtors letter, and I don't think that it's material. They're talking about VA loans in here. I did VA loans for 20 years. It's not affected by this bill whatsoever. So, and Realtors, God bless them, they don't lend money, they sell houses. So, and if you need some follow-up on that, I can send you some information to maybe curtail some of their concerns.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll just add on that, we've had extensive conversations with the Realtors and, we had the Senate side hearing first, and I think that all their issues have been resolved, but we'll make sure that council gets the email chain between us and the Attorney General's office. Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Riley. Thank you, Delegate Chisholm.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
So the bill sounds wonderful. I was just wondering, do we currently have a lot of cases on the books in this matter? And if so, where do our military folks go to, file a complaint, or do we have the data on that?
Fortunately, so I'll say this, Delegate, in your testimony packet, there's a letter from the Department of Defense that actually details out a holistic survey that goes state by state in depth to some of the concerns that military families have had. I will yield to the Secretary on if there's any current pending cases in Maryland. But one of the things that myself and our Senate crossfile heard as we were coming up with this bill and talking to DOD about this bill is especially because we have Andrews Air Force Base here in the state of Maryland in Prince George's County. One of the largest concerns that continues to come up, especially for military spouses, is in regard to housing. So there is a concern in our state about it. If there are any particular cases, I'll yield to the Secretary, but the DOD list that's in your testimony packet is a really good kind of insight into the data and what's happening, not just here in Maryland, but throughout the country as well.
Delegate Riley, do you have a follow-up to the secretary about if there are any cases
Mr.
pending?
Secretary, do you have any data on cases here in the state of Maryland?
I'm not currently familiar with one, but I'd love to follow up and give you a more detailed response. And if I could just quickly add, I think Delegate Boafo was exactly right. Our experience is most folks have kind of become resigned to the fact that this is just a part of military life, and often sort of believe there is no recourse, which is why we were so excited that this bill was introduced, because it would finally provide at least some means to rectify this, particularly from those who do it in a systematic or consistent way. Thank you. But we'll absolutely follow up.
You have a lot of homework.
I certainly do. Three letters now.
And these are very strict teachers here, so you have to turn it in. Can't say your dog ate it either. Any other homework, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
For
Madam
being
Chair. I
patient,
appreciate
and
it.
I hope
Thank
you have a blessed day. This actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 598. Next, we have House Bill 617, Delegate Munoz and Miller, State Information Technology Prohibited Applications and Websites. Will you come up? And do you have a panel? Okay, great. You are enough. Go ahead. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Welcome to HGO.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, House and Government Operations Committee colleagues. For the record, my name is Delegate Rachel Munoz, and I come before you today to humbly present House Bill 617, State Information Technology Restricted Software. I want to start by thanking this committee for all your support and hard work on this bill last year. I so appreciate that it was able to pass out of this committee and out of the House unanimously. As an advocate for the values of security, privacy, and accountability, I believe that this legislation represents a critical step forward in safeguarding our state's information technology systems. Cybersecurity threats pose a constant and ever-evolving challenge. We have a duty to protect the sensitive data of Marylanders and to ensure their safety and privacy is respected. House Bill 617 addresses this imperative by prohibiting access to restricted software on any information technology owned or leased by units of state government. By taking proactive steps to prevent the use of software that poses a threat to our security, we can better protect the interests of our constituents and uphold our commitment to transparency and accountability in government. This year, this bill has a bipartisan crossfile in the Senate, and we have been working collaboratively on a friendly amendment with the Department of Information Technology, the University of Maryland, and the Governor's Office to make sure all parties involved are considered in this bill. With the friendly amendment and the reprint I very much hope you have right now, rather than solely targeting specific applications like TikTok or WeChat, this amendment proposes the establishment of a comprehensive technology advisory list. This list, akin to the U.S. Department of State's travel advisories, would encompass companies, applications, and hardware solutions that pose a threat to Maryland's IT infrastructure. By taking this broader approach, we can better adapt to emerging threats and ensure the security of our state's digital assets. This legislation directs the Department of Budget Management, in collaboration with the Department of Information Technology, to publish guidelines for units of state government to remove and prevent access to restricted software. These guidelines will provide clear standards for compliance and ensure that all units of government are held to the highest standards of cybersecurity. In the Maryland House of Delegates, we understand the importance of investing in the future. This bill represents a crucial step towards enhancing the cybersecurity and resilience of Maryland's information technology infrastructure. In today's rapidly evolving technological landscape, the need for a proactive and adaptable approach to managing technology threats cannot be overstated. I appreciate this committee's support, and I welcome any future collaboration in any way that you see fit. By enacting this legislation, we demonstrate our unwavering dedication to protecting the interests of our citizens and upholding the integrity of our state's technology systems. For the foregoing reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 617.
And can you, and thank you for coming. I know we have a gentleman by the name of Alan Lang Is he here?
I don't believe so.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So I'm gonna open it up for questions. And then I have one or two if they do not ask it. So are there any questions? Delegate Bagno, Delegate Kaiser?
She was first.
She was first. I know, she's going to get me this session. Go ahead, Delegate Kaiser.
I mean,
have to
sometimes I
look
click,
to my right.
you never do.
I have to look to the right.
Sometimes I click right when they start talking, but today I wasn't quite that quick, but thank you both. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Delegate Munoz, I may have missed this in your testimony and I apologize if I did. Has there been any evidence of a problem with some of these sites and the, I don't know, sharing of data or whatever the security concerns that you have? So I just wanted you to focus on that piece, if you could. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate, for the question. And it's so interesting because when we worked with, actually on the chair's advice and wisdom, we worked with the University of Maryland and the Department of Information Technology. We were actually made aware of even more threats and issues that are currently going on. And we've dealt with this a lot at the federal level, and there's federal legislation regarding this issue, but we've dealt with the specific application of TikTok previously through an executive order, but we have not yet dealt with sort of this ongoing threat of, sorry, I'm gonna have to find it now, of cybersecurity issues. And so I think you'll see in the University of Maryland's testimony, they specifically cite that they believe that this legislation will help deal with the high-risk technologies on the state advisory list and put in necessary controls to address the risks. And I know they talked about, in the end, we all agree we need to protect the state from risk posed by foreign adversaries and malicious actors in general. And so just quoting again, the University of Maryland, they believe the structure we've outlined is forward-looking and creates a solution that can evolve over time. And so we know, and I don't know if you remember last year, I had now General Novotny with me, but now he's a general at Cybersecurity Command, so he's not able to come testify with me and share all of his expertise. But he talked a lot about the issues that we're dealing with sort of at the federal level and the state level, and the fact that we're having data breaches, we're having tracking and things like that happening at the level of like Marylanders that poses an unacceptable risk to our security. And so sort of in line with the Restrict Act, which is at the federal level, which was actually passed just after we got out of session last year. This bill does a similar thing at the state level, requiring us to maintain a list of countries that may have, not countries, I apologize, but technologies and software that may pose a risk to Marylanders. And the cool thing about the amendment now is we can evolve that and change it. Things can, be added to the list, things can be removed based on the Department of Information Technology's expertise. And it's not something we're gonna have to come in here every session and bring a new bill to restrict or allow access to technologies.
Sure.
Delegate Munoz, because you mentioned their testimony, what they're saying is that instead of banning the use of particular technologies by state units, we recommend that the bill require all state units or entities contracting, look at the risks and benefits of different technologies. So I'm not sure if that's bearing, but it's not an outright ban that seemingly USM is recommending.
Yeah, so we worked with the University of Maryland. I don't know if you have the amendment and the reprint in front of you. And so we worked with them. So the new bill is very different, and we're not targeting any specific software or applications of any kind. The new bill is just going to allow the Department of Information Technology to create a list of things that they currently believe to be of a threat to to the state of Maryland. And so then we're going to prohibit those on our actual devices, not personal devices, not average citizens' devices, just devices of state government.
You're welcome. Who has the bill on the floor in the Senate?
So it's a long list of senators.
You said bipartisan, but
Yes, it's quite a long
It's
list.
okay, don't worry.
It's both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate.
Okay, all right, thank you. Delegate Bagno, I don't see your light anymore. So my question is, who have you met with? Where are you in the discussions with the amendments?
So, do you guys have the amendments and the reprints we sent over?
So we don't have it and we have to,
Okay.
we do not have it. There is an issue this year where we're not allowed to upload it. When we
Oh.
met in person, you were able to bring the 25 copies and everybody got it. So we'll make
I
sure.
think we have those. I'm so sorry. I know
You
we
have them? Can
Evan?
you give it to us to
Do you have the
distribute?
copies of the reprint and the amendment? Or did you give it to the office? I think he brought it to the office, so
You have it? Can you please make sure everyone gets it? Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I thought you
It's
had
okay.
it in front
everyone
of
will
you.
get it. We're gonna get to the bottom of it. We'll fix
Okay,
this.
so to
Um,
answer your question while we're waiting is we've met with the University of Maryland, the Department of Information Technology, and they have in turn met with the governor's office. And we believe that the bill as it is currently written in the reprint makes all parties happy, all
Okay,
of those parties.
all right. And I met with Tic Tac this afternoon and I
Mhm.
encouraged them to get in touch with you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And they're no longer listed in this bill.
Okay,
So
thank you. So if you could just touch base with them, that would be great.
absolutely.
Any other questions or concerns? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming to the committee and for working it.
Thank you very much for
You're
having
welcome.
me.
You're welcome. This actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill, one second. On House Bill 617. And next, we're going to go to House Bill 594, I believe, am I right? And it's the Dorchester County Delegation, legal advertisement or legal notice, publication in newspaper or newspaper in general circulation, digital newspaper. How are you, Delegate?
Well, good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Madam Chair,
We're
Madam
gonna have
Vice
some
Chair,
hard
and
questions for you,
the best
because you are a pro
Committee.
now.
in the General Assembly.
Yes.
So my name is Tom Hutchinson from District 37B, and I'm also Chair of the Dorchester County Delegation. And yes, this is actually my first time in front of HGO. I wish I had a little bit of a sexier bill, but it's an important bill for Dorchester County. So I'm here today to modernize a law that was written in the 1950s and see if we can get legal advertisement and legal notices to the 21st century. Today, I'm presenting House Bill 594, legal advertisement and legal notice, publication in a newspaper or newspaper in general circulation, digital newspapers, with an amendment. And the amendment is that since it's a Dorchester County bill, a Dorchester County delegation, it was at the request of Dorchester County, I have amended it that this will apply to just Dorchester County. Now, I love newspapers, I always have, and I'm sad to see so many of them not surviving any longer. I'm going to date myself here, but when I first moved to Baltimore City, I recall not only the Baltimore Sun, but there was also an Evening Sun, but that disappeared in 1998. When I moved to Dorchester County, there was also the Daily Banner, and as the name implies, it came out daily, but the daily circulation ended years ago. Today, there are two publications that qualify as a newspaper of general circulation for purposes of publishing legal advertisements and legal notices. They are the Dorchester Banner, which is now published only once a week on Wednesdays, and the Dorchester Star. This is the Sunday edition, which actually cost me $3, which I couldn't believe it cost me that much money. And that only comes out online on Mondays and Tuesdays and in print format on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then on Sunday. But I would contest that the full Star Democrat is really a Talbot County publication and has very little circulation in Dorchester County. It's their sister publication, the Star Democrat, which publishes only weekly, and that comes out on Fridays. Current law requires that legal advertisements and legal notices must be in a physical print format. Online advertisements or notices are not permitted. Because of the frequency schedule of the Dorchester Banner and the Dorchester Star, the council is put in a difficult position to be able to notify the public in a timely manner. Council meetings are held on a Tuesday evening, thus delaying publication in the Banner by 8 days and the Dorchester Star by at least 4 days. The Dorchester County asks that the law be modernized so that the online advertisement notices can be a legal form of notification. Depending on the notice, they have to be published multiple times over a specific period. This would allow us to notify citizens earlier before the print editions are available. I know the Press Association is going to come up in opposition to this bill. I know they have a job to make sure that they can maximize their advertising dollars for the newspaper industry. Dorchester County Council is very concerned about either or both of these publications ceasing operations or at a minimum discontinuing a print edition. I don't think anyone can say that will never happen. To protect the county and to ensure no disruption of running the county business, we feel it's important to act now. This bill increases access to legal information for Dorchester County citizens as digital media becomes more prevalent. The Dorchester County delegation respectfully asks the committee for a favorable vote on House Bill 594. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegate? Yes.
Come on, you really? Come on.
Well, we do have a real question. Don't go. Stay. Delegate Hill.
I have been quiet most of the day, but since you're here.
Oh, it's going to be multiple, I'm sure.
And that's your statement. You
That's my
should know
statement.
better.
You sort of addressed the concerns of the industry, but why is it that you don't think that by doing this bill, you're actually accelerating the demise of the newspaper? That by allowing, these notices to be done otherwise, that it's taking away income, and that's going to actually lead to the outcome of their not being able to survive?
They would still have to pay for the online advertisements that go online as well. So there would be income coming to the paper.
Delegate Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Delegate Hutchinson, I was approached by the Register of Wills of Frederick County beyond the ability to get a bill drafted with something similar to this. Do you know if it would apply to the Register of Wills in Dorchester County, and was that motivation for this bill?
That is not motivation for this bill. It's really the county business itself was at question. I don't know if it pertains to the Register of Wills, and I'll have to follow up with you on that.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Seeing none, delegate, thank you very much. If
Thank you.
can follow up and send the delegate and everyone else the answer, that would be great. Great testimony. Next, we have Delegate, oh. What is it? Oh, do I have some? Oh, I'm so sorry. I am like going so fast that I didn't even realize that we do have Rebecca Snyder. I am so sorry, Rebecca. I should know better. I know, I should know better.
So
I'll give you an extra second just for that, okay?
thank you, thank you. So thank you, members of the committee and Chair. My name is Rebecca Snyder. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. And so we represent all news media across the state. And I understand the impetus behind the Dorchester County Delegation Bill.
Thank you.
However, it's a solution for a problem that has not yet occurred. They have 2 print publications. Those publications are also online, and all of those ads do go online. It is not, we want to make sure that notice really does serve the public. And I think we want to make sure that the verifiability of print is intact, the record is intact. And I think this bill, even narrowed to Dorchester County, I think there are unintended consequences or unknown consequences. To Delegate Kerr's question, this changes the definition of newspaper of general circulation. So it does affect Register of Wills. It affects everything. And I think it is premature to, simply because Dorchester County, and I understand it's been amended to be a local delegation bill, these are big issues. And I think just to blithely say, oh, we're going to add online in here. How do we know that online only publications aren't just going to, they have trusted news media sources. I understand that the goal is that those ads would still run in trusted media sources, but it doesn't guarantee. And I think at the very least, we need to talk about this in a very serious way to say, okay, what's this? How does it work? Because I think just inserting online is not good enough and it doesn't do service to notice, which needs to be independent. It needs to be to the widest possible audience. It needs to be archivable. So I urge you to reject, even though it's a local delegation bill.
Thank you. That was so sweet. No, just kidding. Delegate Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have been doing this for a few years, right? Has there been any engagement to workshop it, or in other words, we're trying to catch up with the times and the changing media landscape. And so every year we see another bill come in that tries to address this. Have you all come up with recommendations for how we can do it, or have you been part of any work group that has tried to come up with a global solution so we don't have to keep coming back year after year and having these same discussions?
I would love to talk to you about a wide variety of other issues as well. So internally, our association is discussing a path forward. I don't think that we have unity on it yet. You know, we represent a really wide swath of publications, and we really, we want it to be, I think that generally there's this perception that, oh, it's about the money. This is not. This is about transparency. It's about making sure that citizens know about actions that affect them. And so, and yes, there is a revenue component, but there's a revenue component in everything in the world. And so we are working on this. I don't think, I could say, oh, by, next week when the subcommittee meets, I don't have a plan. And so in the absence of that, we still oppose, because I need to make sure that we understand what's going on. And I think you all need to understand the effects of this as well.
Sure. Thank you. The consolidation of local press, the big conglomerates and Wall Street investors who are buying up all the media, does that affect, from your standpoint, in a positive or negative, this transparency goal and the whole goal of requiring public notice? In the first place, we require it to make sure people know what's going on. We have fewer and fewer local press. Does that have any impact from your standpoint, on the need to address this?
I don't think that there is a better solution out there. Every jurisdiction in Maryland has at least one publication. And so it is, they are doing the job. Now, on a corporate level, it's not my role to say whether I agree or disagree with, the consolidation or the corporate takeovers. However, there are local news outlets that are still going strong, that are adding readers. Some of them add them more in online than in print. And that's true because people's habits change. We just did a survey though we white label a readership survey and send it out for our members. And I always ask the public notice question. And I believe it was over 60% of the respondents said that they preferred to have public notice in their local newspaper in print. And we also asked, in terms of reader habits, and actually it was a fascinating survey, I'll send it along. But one of the things we found was that if people have a choice between print and online, it was surprising how many people prefer print. They might go and access in both ways, and there's benefits to each, but print is not dead. And I think also as people start to shy away from social media because of privacy concerns, because of, tracking concerns, they need to be able to access appropriate and transparent news sources. And so I do think print is not dead, for sure.
I have Vice Chair Collison, followed by Delegate Johnson, followed by Delegate Olston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Rebecca. Good to see you.
Likewise.
So I'm not sure that this will help the Dorchester delegation, but I do have some clarifying questions. Is it your experience that most of these local papers have both a print and digital format?
Well, I think everything has even, I think the last paper to get a website was out in Oakland, and that was probably a good 7 or 8 years ago. And to get a website. And so every publication that I'm aware of in our membership does have print and online components.
So would it help in this, if I may follow up, would it help if this bill said instead of online or print, if it said online and print?
I think we would just have to, I don't know, because I want to really make sure that we understand what I don't want is for someone to be able to spin up a 4-page pub that's pink slime journalism that suddenly can present themselves as another news source. I think it's just, I would want to really look at that language firmly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I encourage you to meet with Delegate Hutchinson? And,
Absolutely.
And discuss possible language?
Absolutely.
That would be great. Delegate Hutchinson, do you have her information? Do you have her information? All right, wonderful. I have Delegate Olson said no, or you? Go ahead.
Thank you. I think Delegate Johnson, you had Delegate Johnson first.
He said, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
I owe you one.
So my question is, I know in Prince George's County, I don't believe we have a print local paper anymore. Most of them have went out of business. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You have the Inquirer Gazette and you have the Prince George's Post.
Okay. All right. So it is very expensive. And I was just talking to our Register of Wills as well as the Clerk of Court. It's very expensive for pro se litigants to post those notices in those publications. The prices have become exorbitant. And one of the things they're looking at is posting it on the county's website for notice. So if in Dorchester, they used an official government website, would that be more palatable to you?
Absolutely not. I mean, that is, so the independence of notice is really what there are 4 components of appropriate public notice. One is independence from the entity that's placing the notice. So if the Register of Wills is posting it on the county website or the Register of Wills website, that fails that division almost immediately. I think, and I do know that I've heard from my members that there are complications at the Register of Wills because oftentimes the register will close an estate without making sure that the publication gets paid. And so it's there's issues there in terms of how those notices kind of get placed and how they go. But I feel like this bill, which Delegate Hutchinson put in, or the commissioners put in to solve a perceived problem about government notice, has really far-reaching implications. I mean, we've heard about Register of Wills. We'll hear about, zoning notices would be covered. Everything would be covered when you change the definition. And I'm not sure that it's something that if you don't understand all the pieces of it, I don't think it should be done.
Okay. Delegate Johnson, thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for coming to help explain this to us. I'm a little confused about the objection because it says through the print or digital format. You've stated that just about all publications, if not all, have a website. So, and this is a delegation bill, so the whole delegation has some concern. So I'm not really understanding the objection.
So there are certain notices that require an affidavit of publication that's not been determined, or there's not a mechanism for verifying that something has run online. There's also requirements of verifiability. It's not, when it's in print, it's solid. It's there. This is what's happened. You can say, yep, I attest to that, and we're good. The industry doesn't have it's set up necessarily to provide those affidavits. And I understand the government notices that are sort of prompting this don't always require an affidavit, but some, once you open up that can of worms, many things require an affidavit of publication. And so I think, again, this is where we want to look at how does this affect everything downstream, and how can we make sure that notice, which is an important part of informing the public, stays in an appropriate way.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so they still have the option to go through print if it requires an affidavit, because it still says through print or digital. So if you have the option of print, you can do that. But doesn't this bill cover if you don't have an option of print?
Well, I think that I would want to see that print be primary. Like, I think you need to be able to say, okay, it's here or it's here. It just feels, it's very fractured. And I do feel like I would want to really strongly look at language, and I've committed to work with Delegate Hutchison on it.
My pleasure. Delegate White Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you for being here. With the conversation that we're having about the potential consequences of this if it moves forward, has this occurred in other places where our regional media outlets can learn from other jurisdictions? And if so, how is that informing some of these insights that you are presenting to us?
Well, Florida has a really complicated and strange, honestly, it was politically motivated way to post notices that has some sort of tiered system of, what kind of circulation things have, and some things can be posted on government websites, some things have to be posted in the newspaper, and it's kind of a mess. That literally just came in, and I would not ever recommend us looking at Florida. It is not, customary. There are things, and the General Assembly has also posted or approved things that have gone, some notices, where you're, like there's one about speeding tickets or something, you put that on a website. But generally there's some very specific tiny pieces of notice, but generally, it is all in print.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you for making yourself available to meet with a delegate. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Now, this really concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 594. Delegate Grossman, I was about to end your hearing before you even started. So I am calling House Bill 566. State and local government real property Confederate naming prohibited. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I'll speak loudly.
You're very well. Please use your microphone and yell at me. Well, don't yell at me. Just speak loudly. Should you need to.
Welcome to our committee. This is your first time here.
This is my first time here. Thank you. I'm
You're
excited.
welcome.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Delegate Brooke Grossman, and I'm here to testify on behalf of House Bill 566. Before I go into my testimony, I know in your packet, you'll see from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, a couple of amendments around clarifying some language in this bill related to the definition of a Confederate name and what constitutes real and state property. We would consider those amendments friendly. So I just wanted to call that out before I went into my testimony. HB 566 would provide a necessary change to how counties in the state of Maryland name properties, streets, parks, and other publicly owned entities. This bill would specifically prohibit county and state governments from naming public property after any individual who voluntarily served in the Confederacy of the United States or after the Confederacy itself. Furthermore, any county or state properties named after a Confederate individual must be renamed by January 1st, 2027 as written, 2027 as amended, potentially 2030. Again, we would consider that friendly. The state of Maryland would not be the first jurisdiction to pursue naming prohibition. In 2019, Congressman Gregory Meeks proposed an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act that prohibited the Department of Defense from naming assets after Confederate leaders or battlefield victories. Subsequently, in 2021, Congress in a bipartisan manner passed the NDAA, which stipulated that the DoD form a naming commission to rename any of their assets associated with Confederate individuals. Aside from their military assets, the commission named hundreds of other assets such as streets, buildings that were recommended for renaming. At the end of 2023, the DoD had renamed 9 Army bases and multiple vessels. In Loudoun County, Virginia, and the city of Alexandria in Virginia have begun the process of renaming their streets that are commemorative of Confederate leaders. Additionally, Montgomery County has identified multiple streets and that commemorate Confederate leaders and subsequently begun the renaming process. These changes would be reflective of Maryland's goals to be inclusive and to ensure that our schools, streets, and parks are not commemorative, of Confederate individuals. In many cases around the country, the naming of public properties in honor of Confederate individuals became popular decades after the Civil War as backlash to the Civil Rights Movement. The commemoration of Confederate leaders in public spaces is psychologically and emotionally harmful to people of color, as Professor Greg Susan Ferguson of the University of West Virginia has noted in her research. She interviewed over a dozen Black educators from schools named after Confederate leaders. One educator stated, "I think that a school named after a Confederate can only be used as a negative role model for Black students, or any student for that matter, of what not to do." Another educator stated, "I would not want my Teacher of the Year award to have my name tied to a white supremacist. Just think of all of the African-American student diplomas under the banner of a Confederate name for a lifetime." Maryland should ensure that the names of our public properties do not commemorate or a cause or individuals who engaged in a rebellion for the purpose of a rebellion to preserve the ability to maintain enslaved Americans. The history of our country has a place. It's in textbooks, museums, and national battlefields where the context can be provided of an understanding of what those individuals engaged in. All Marylanders should live, work, and play in spaces that are welcoming and reflective of our shared values. And with that, I request and urge a favorable report for HB 566, and I'll pass it on to my panel.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Stan Brown. I'm here asking for a favorable report also upon this bill 566. I only have a few points to make in support. One, there can never be any true accountability for the horrendous injustices and mistreatment and prejudicial rules and lynchings committed toward Black people under the Confederacy and its cousin Jim Crow. These actions were and are abominable and repugnant. Not to mention the dreadful emotional and mental anguish inflicted upon Black people for decades. House Bill 566 may, in some measure, provide a semblance of recompense as it would extinguish the legacy of the Confederacy by disallowing the naming of streets, roads, parks, subdivisions in our state. As Delegate Grossman has already said, it would also mandate that any existing real property with the Confederate name be renamed before January 1st, 2027. And if I may stand, Madam Chair, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I have a couple pictures here. The second picture may be a little bit graphic, but I have no other way to help people truly understand what the impact of the Confederacy had upon Black people. This is a picture of Jim Crow. This is what Black people had to endure under Jim Crow.
Just this way. Yeah.
Second picture is a picture
And Delegate Hill will pass it around.
of a lynching.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's truly graphic, but this is what occurred. This is what was encouraged under Jim Crow.
You want to give that to Delegate Hill? It's okay. Thank you, Delegate Hill. Thank you.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. This is the panel of favorable. We do have the National Park and Planning. Will you
they're
please bring them
virtual.
up? 1 second, please. Please bring them up. Thank you. Since she's accepting the amendments, and while they come out, you did state that you will accept the amendments as friendly. Have you made the request?
Yeah.
You made the request. With the amendment office, did you request the amendments?
Well, yes, we requested, we're favorable of the amendment put forth by the Parks Commission.
Right, but did you make the request
We
to
have
the
not, we
amendment
got it
office?
this morning, so we'll put it in.
So if you can please request all the amendments, to make sure the council gets it, and make sure that you send it to my office so that everyone can get
Sure.
it, okay? Thank you. Good afternoon. Is she there? Good afternoon. Can you unmute yourself, please? Good
Hello.
afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Can you please get started?
Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't hear you.
It's okay.
My name is Jordan Balcom Colbert. I'm the Government Affairs Liaison for the Office of General Counsel for the Maryland National Capital Parking Planning Commission. Our Board of Commissioners have voted to support this bill with friendly amendments, as the sponsor has said. Both our Prince George's County and Montgomery County Planning Departments have either worked or done research on Confederate naming prohibitions. Our planning department undertook a review of county-owned maintained streets, parks, and facilities to identify the names after known Confederates. After over a year of research, 3 streets with full name Confederate matches were renamed to honor local African-American historical figures. Our Prince George's County Planning Department served on the county's Reasonable Legacy Task Force a few years ago to review county monuments, street names, county businesses and buildings, just to name a few that were linked to past prejudices in effort to achieve some of the same goals of this bill. I want to highlight a few efforts we believe require undertakings in such implementation, such as researching military rosters, pension records, census data, just to name a few. And based on our experience, these types of undertakings can take more than 3 years to complete. We recommend clarifying and defining the connections to Confederacy that must be researched as a part of this undertaking. Again, our experience demonstrates that these references to Confederacy often go well beyond the names of military commanders. As the sponsor says, we recommend adding public use language because technically many street names are not owned by political jurisdictions and have been dedicated to public use. Lastly, we recommend commemorating the property at issue in honor of a non-Confederate with the same name, which establishes the new name without the need to change the physical address for impacted property owners along the streets. Please see our written testimony for further details. Thank you for your time, Chair and Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony today. I'm going to open it up for question. This is her first time here. Are there any questions for this delegate? Now, the real questions. I have Delegate Rosenberg, followed by Delegate Morgan.
Delegate, you spoke of a federal bill. Did the bill pass? And if it did, or even if it didn't, how does your bill compare in substance to that bill?
So the federal bill
It's on.
did pass. And that is what established the NDAA. Similarly, right, the research has taken place to identify the sites that needed change. So far, 9 bases or vessels have been changed with recommendations for more. So similar in our bill, the initial piece is going to obviously have to be the research across the state of how many of those locations there are. And I would suspect, I don't want to speak for the Parks Commission, that then a prioritization of those changes will come through and a cost associated with each one. So it's very similar. And I hope that answers your question. If there's more information I can get for you, I can get it for you offline. No? Okay.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
My pleasure.
Thank you for the bill. I'm looking. Do you have a list of how many properties this would impact or potentially impact?
We don't, Delegate. That's actually part of the fiscal note for this bill, would be the 2 FY 24 and 25 years for the research of that to be completed. So that's why the fiscal note's a little ambiguous. The only property, or not property, there was one highway that had already been identified. That is, I think it's the Colonel Douglas Highway, which would be $20,000 for the renaming of that. We would have to come back once the research is completed again to understand what that list of prioritizations and costs that are associated with that are. The fiscal note currently is related to establishing the research to provide us that information.
So just real quick follow-up. So do you think it's best to handle this through a statewide bill that considers this, or maybe would it not be better to take this at one situation at a time? And this is my theory on this, because we got into this about 4 or 5 years ago with the Tawny statue that was on the State House. And that was Supreme Court Justice William Tawney. And it set up like this weird scenario in the General Assembly, like where we had me on one side. I was actually on the side with Mike Miller. Shocking. And you had my friend Kathy Slago on the other side. And personally, I thought the Tawney statue should have stayed in the State House. And the simple reason is that Tawney offered a horrible decision of Dred Scott, basically called African Americans, not even human, list them as property. Horrible decision, but he later recanted all this in life and he had like redemption. And to me, without the Tawney statue there, you can't tell the accurate story of Thurgood Marshall. That you have a Supreme Court justice from the exact same state that's now African-American, like 80 years later, serving in the United States Supreme Court. And I always thought that when you remove the Tawney statue, you couldn't talk about the strife and tell the story accurately of Thurgood Marshall. And I guess the point is that the country is not perfect, but it's self-correcting. And I worry about stuff like this where we're ripping off names just because somebody might have had some tie to a confederacy, but they might have had something really, really great in their life. And now we're just pulling it away from a 21st century perspective. So I guess my question is, I know that was more of a statement, but do you have concerns if some of this history might be getting like taken away for people to
So I think again, in
the right to
sure,
learn?
in the amendment, I think it narrows the scope specifically of who you're identifying as those that participated in the Confederacy. And in terms of limiting where or how we start, I think that there are people across the whole state of Maryland that are impacted by this. And so I would lean away from concentrating in one specific area and recognizing that I think this is an issue that frankly has ramifications across the whole state.
You're welcome. Delegate, it was first Vice Chair Collison, then Delegate Rosenberg, then Delegate Alston. See,
Thank
no
you.
one to the right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you have any notion of what the expense is, what that $20,000 is that just to replace the signs that are along the road?
For the Douglas Highway, yes, that's for, it's 2 large signs that need to be replaced for that particular highway. And the cost would vary, right, Delegate, depending on if it's a large highway sign versus a small street sign. And that's part of, again, what we would hope would come from the research is really identifying for us the larger kind of lifts, if you will, opposed to the smaller changing a sign or a plate on the outside of a building or some of those kinds of things. But it is for 2 signs that are related to that highway.
Sure. Delegate Rosenberg, followed by Delegate Alston.
If I may, just a little historical perspective, is that appropriate?
Sure.
Okay. That was not an emphatic, but I'll be brief.
What am I gonna say? No. No.
Well, I wasn't around. I wasn't around when Dred Scott was decided, but I was around when Brown versus the board was decided. So initially, there was a proposal, a bill to take down the Tawney statute. And what we did instead of taking it down was add the Marshall statute on Lawyers Mall, which commemorates Brown and also the case integrated in the University of Maryland Law School. But I believe it was after Charlottesville that the decision was made to take down the Tawney statute.
Yeah.
So initially it stayed, and then we added Marshall and the other 2 statutes. I just thought that's relevant.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam.
And you're correct as far as the history. So I'm glad that you spoke up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Alston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, are you familiar with any statutes in this state or anywhere in the United States that commemorate the treasonous activity of Benedict Arnold?
Delegate, do you mind speaking up? I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. You said that earlier. I was just wondering if you are familiar with any statutes either in the United States or the state of Maryland that commemorate the treasonous activity of Benedict Arnold.
There are none that I'm aware of, but I'll do some more research to confirm that I'm correct.
Follow up. And I'm just curious, do you know of any other country that celebrates those who have tried to betray the very foundation of what the country stands for?
So again, none that I'm aware of, but I will do some research for you just to confirm I'm correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the answer is no. So you don't have to spend research on it. Okay.
I was just,
anyway, that was a softball, but the answer is no. So are there any other questions for the delegate? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully you had a great experience here. Have a great day. This actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 566. Next, we're going to go to House Bill 756. Delegate Hutchinson, General Provision, State Flag Casket of Ineligible.
Twice in one day.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the best committee in the Maryland General Assembly. My name is Delegate Tom Hutchinson from District 37B. I'm here to present House Bill 756, State Flag Casket of an Eligible Decedent with an amendment. I'm joined today with Matt Padone, who along with Chris Shank brought this bill to my attention. I'll let Matt passionately tell the story why there's a need for this bill for something that really impacted both Matt and Chris when he testifies. And interestingly, if passed, all of us on this committee will one day benefit from this bill. So what does this bill do? The bill requires the Secretary of State's office to create a process to provide a Maryland state flag to drape the casket of an eligible decedent. Establish a process for the state flag to be claimed after the burial and presented to the family, and requires the Secretary of State's office to procure flags that are wholly produced in the United States of America. Current law requires the Secretary of State to issue a state flag to the family of a firefighter, policeman, member of the military, sworn member of the Office of the State Fire Marshal, or professional or volunteer emergency medical services who is killed in the line of duty. There is no law requiring a state flag to be provided to the family of eligible decedents. Eligible decedents include an employee of the state or political subdivision who died as a result of 1, an accidental injury that arose out of or in the course of employment with the state, an injury caused by willful or negligent act of a third person during their course of employment, current or former members of the Maryland General Assembly, current or former constitutional officers, and constitutional officers are defined in statute as the Lieutenant Governor, the Comptroller, the Treasurer, Secretary of State, and the Attorney General. This also includes current and former judges, current or former cabinet secretaries, and other individuals whom the governor designates via executive order. These are all individuals who have served or will have served our state with great pride and dignity. Interestingly, the amendment is to include the governor as an eligible decedent because we realize the governor is actually not a constitutional officer. So that is what the amendment is. So whoops on that. So thankfully, and I respectfully ask the committee for a favorable vote on House Bill 756. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to speak today in favor of House Bill 756. My name is Michael Padone. I'm a Maryland attorney. The views I express today are solely my own, not those of my firm or any of its clients. Thanks to Delegate Hutchinson for his leadership on this bill. I just have a few remarks to provide context for my written testimony. I served as Governor Hogan's chief legal counsel, and in that role, I managed the process for his judicial appointments. Together with the judicial nominating commissions around the state, my office, the Office of Legal Counsel, put tremendous effort into vetting judicial candidates to help the governor appoint the best possible people to serve the needs of everyday Marylanders. As a result, his judicial appointees truly feel to us like a big extended family. Last year's murder of Judge Andrew Wilkinson, an appointee of Governor Hogan, I can only describe as a gut punch. He was a brilliant lawyer and jurist, and he was known to everyone as just a decent guy. And he did the hard work that public servants do, making decisions, sometimes having to pick winners and losers, but all while trying to be fair and humane. And for that service, he was murdered in his own yard. So in HB 756, you have an opportunity to create a new tradition in this state where we honor the service of the people who have held positions of great public responsibility or who gave their lives in the line of duty with a final sign of gratitude and respect by draping their caskets with our flag. Because really, ours is the best flag. And it is the one thing that, regardless of how we might otherwise identify, unites us as Marylanders. I therefore urge the committee to issue a favorable report on HB 756 with the amendment the delegate mentioned, and I'm happy to take any questions.
And thank you, and I'm sorry about your loss.
All
Really
of our
am.
loss.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Delegate Hill.
Thank you for this bill, Delegate. I'm just curious, it doesn't mention in the bill, are you imagining a ceremony similar to a ceremony that we have with those who are draped with the US flag? Or if there's someone who's getting both, have you, I'm not trying to get too much into details, but I want to think about.
Sure. So typically funeral directors, or to the extent that a person was in the military or law enforcement and honor guard, will handle those aspects of the ceremony. That's privately arranged as a part of the funeral arrangements. All we want to do here is just ensure that such a flag is provided through the Secretary of State's office for that ceremony.
So it wouldn't be just be draping the flag over the ceremony, or if they already had a US flag, handing a folded flag to the family that represents the state, it would be. This is the state flag or the US flag?
This is the state flag.
Right, okay.
Right.
Okay, so probably a ceremony.
Yes, I think typically my experience has been at veterans funerals that even every funeral director is experienced in how to properly fold a US flag and ceremoniously present it to the next of kin. We would certainly expect the funeral directors would be able to do the same thing with a Maryland flag.
Who also qualified here would get two flags.
Yes,
which
they
is
would.
fine. They would get the state flag and the US.
To reflect both of their services.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. However, how would the Secretary of State know? Should you have an amendment that requires the request to go to the Secretary of State so that they know that the flag is needed? Because it's not in the bill.
Right. So what we would expect would be that the Secretary of State could establish that procedure with for the benefit of the funeral directors who could contact the office to obtain the flag.
Right, but it will have to be in the bill, the law. Huh? It can just say, the Secretary of State upon request. We need an amendment for the bill.
Well, it does say shall furnish, Secretary of State shall furnish a state flag.
But it can say on request shall furnish. It doesn't say upon request. It just says shall furnish, but how do you furnish it if you're not aware that it's needed?
So that's we could certainly talk about an amendment to address that process issue.
So Delegate Hutchinson, will you be so kind and require an amendment, request an amendment that requires request to Secretary of State so that they know that the flag is needed? Make sure that the council gets it and that Michelle gets it so the whole committee can get it as well.
Absolutely. Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Delegate Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And along those lines, I was trying to figure out how logistically this would work, because it does say previous members or current members of the General Assembly or any of these other folks that would possibly retire and be out of state upon a death. Then I think that amendment would make much more sense and it would cover everybody in that aspect. Isn't that so?
I think inserting the words upon request before shall furnish or after shall furnish probably
Yeah.
solves it.
You can play with it. Thank you. And I thank my council, our council. Thank you. All right, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
you.
really appreciate it. Appreciate your testimony. This actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 756. Next, we have House Bill 394, Delegate Gazzoni, Human Relations Commission on Civil Rights, Appeal of Final Orders. Will you be so kind and come up with your panel? And I believe you have Deborah Gardner and Jennifer Rode. Will you please come up with the wonderful delegate? Thank you. And as soon as you sit down, will you be so kind and start? And welcome to HGO. And everyone waiting, thank you for your patience as you wait to be called. We appreciate it. Go ahead.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Health and Government Operations Committee. I'm Delegate Pam Gazzoni, representing Howard County's District 13, and I'm here in support of House Bill 394, which will restore the right of appeal, the right to appeal a finding of no probable cause to pursue a complaint of discrimination in a public accommodation filed with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. This bill is a simple clarification of the law governing the process when appeals from the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights may be elevated beyond the circuit court. The panel members will share the events that led to the need for this clarification. I'm not a lawyer. I'm struggling with managing all the circuit court, appeals court, Supreme Court right off the bat. So I'm going to leave that part of the discussion to them. However, even as a non-lawyer, I know this classification is necessary. It will provide Marylanders suffering discrimination an additional level of judicial review past the circuit court by specifically stating that reconsideration of a finding of no probable cause by the Maryland Commission of Civil Rights is appealable as provided in the Administrative Procedures Act. This is the standard process for other administrative proceedings, and as you will hear, was commonly believed to be the case for the Maryland Commission of Civil Rights too. Again, this is a straightforward bill that makes something that everyone believed to be a statutory right to appeal to actually be a statutory right. I respectfully request a favorable report for HB 394. Now I will turn it over to Ms. Gardner.
Good afternoon, Ms. Gardner. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Delegate Gazzone, for your sponsorship on this bill. As the delegate said, it's a simple bill. It is occasioned by a 4-3 decision of the Maryland Supreme Court that went not our way. It was the issue was raised by one of the judges in the appellate court on her own initiative. Prior to her having done so and the ultimate decision going the way that it did, for 40 years, there had been the general understanding, including at the Commission on Civil Rights itself, that there was appellate jurisdiction in such cases. I would mention also that our Chief Justice Matthew Fader penned the dissent in the case. So I commend that particular part of the opinion to your attention for obvious reasons. The most complaints at the commission are disposed of at the no probable cause stage because the agency is underfunded and understaffed. A very small number of investigators must make the initial determination about whether the complaint should go forward before the agency for a contested proceeding, for an administrative hearing. So the vast majority of its decisions escape judicial review now under this decision, at least escape appellate review. So I don't know if I introduced myself. I apologize. I'm Deborah Gardner with the legal director of the Public Justice Center, who litigated this case before the appellate courts. So I urge a favorable report on the bill. I want to commend to your attention as well the testimony of Michael Abrams in your file, who was not able to be here today unexpectedly because of a litigation conflict. He traces the history of the commission and the history of Maryland's very important legacy of fighting discrimination. Maryland was the first Southern state to pass a statewide public accommodations discrimination bill around the time that our former Chief Justice, while he was a high school student, sat in at Hooper's Restaurant in the 1960s. with this bill, the General Assembly has the opportunity to continue its historic commitment to progress and to correct this step backwards. The last thing I want to say is that
You have to wrap it up, please.
I will, absolutely. I just want to tell you that Jennifer Rowe, whose case was lost, who no longer has an opportunity to have her opportunity for justice in her discrimination case, is here with us today. And I'm happy to introduce her and proud to introduce her because though the bill will not help her, she is here because she is motivated to correct the matter for others who need to make a complaint to the commission.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Rowe, and thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Delegate Pena Melnick and members of the Health and Government Operations Committee. My name is Jennifer Rowe. As a resident of Maryland and a person with a disability, I am here to testify in support of House Bill 394. From 2016 to 2019, I was a member of Krav Maga Maryland, which is a self-defense school in Columbia. In 2019, my membership was canceled in retaliation for complaining about discrimination I had experienced there. I immediately reported the incident to the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights in the hope of holding the school accountable. Unfortunately, my experience with the commission was deeply disappointing. First, the intake supervisor incorrectly stated that the commission did not handle retaliation claims and required me to remove that part of my complaint. Second, although the regulations require a conference that includes both sides, the investigator met with the school and its legal counsel before meeting with me. By the time I met with him, he seemed to have already accepted the school's version of events. I expressed my concern about bias, and he responded by becoming defensive, accusing me of mistreating him and very abruptly ending the meeting. Approximately 8 months later, I learned that the commission had found no probable cause to believe that discrimination had occurred. I submitted a request for reconsideration as required, which was denied without any explanation. Then I filed a petition for judicial review. Unfortunately, the circuit court did not take me seriously. It upheld the finding with very little analysis. I appealed, but both the appellate court and the state Supreme Court ruled that jurisdiction ends at the circuit court. Out of options, I was left with a sense of injustice and second-class citizenship, as well as deep concern for other marginalized and vulnerable residents. Therefore, I urge the committee to support House Bill 394, and thank you for hearing my concerns.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I appreciate it. Before we get into questions, I want to ask Delegate, did you speak to Glendora Hughes from the commission?
I did not know.
Okay. So
My panel members have.
So, all right. So do they have a position?
I believe they advised us that their position is they will follow the law as the General Assembly directs, and they are not opposing the bill.
Okay. Delegate, if you could just touch base with Glendora, okay, and we
Certainly.
can give you that information. We have it. Are there any questions for this panel from anyone? Seeing none, I just want to tell you, thank you for sharing your experience with us, with the committee. We really appreciate your time. And Delegate, thank you for bringing this bill forward. You did not need to be an attorney.
Thanks.
You did quite well. And this actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 394. You have a blessed day. Next, we have House Bill 712. Delegate Rosenberg, Public Information Act denials confidential information. If you can come up. And I believe, Delegate Rosenberg, that your panel is Taya Graham, Stephen Janis, Rebecca Snyder. If they can all come up with you, that's your panel. Good afternoon, Delegate, and thank you everyone for being patient as you wait.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, fellow colleagues on the committee. House Bill 712 as amended and has been significantly narrowed and clarified by the amendments, speaks to the public's right to know about decisions that governments make at all level regarding benefits and incentives, tax benefits, tax credits to private businesses. This is prompted by a lawsuit that well, actually initially an action regarding a tax credit for a property and a proposed building in Inner Harbor East in Baltimore. And the Able Foundation sought to get the information, the relevant information, making, as is the norm, a request under the Public Information Act. And it was rejected by the city government. They went to court. Some 5 years later, there was a court decision. And in the interim, there was a Supreme Court decision reinterpreting, I think it's fair to say, the federal equivalent, the public information, the federal equivalent of our Public Information Act, the Freedom of Information Act, narrowing the circumstances when such information can be made available to a private entity or to a newspaper or any. Well, in this instance, it's Able, which was a charitable foundation, a research entity, but obviously the Public Information Act also applies to newspapers and others exercising First Amendment responsibilities. So the amendment that is before you.
If I may, Delegate, did you make the amendment request? Because we don't have it. It's not in the file.
My mistake.
Yeah, can you please make the amendment request to make sure council gets it?
It's been made.
It's been made. Do you have the copies?
I have
One?
a copy.
Okay.
I apologize. I
It's
would have.
okay. Can you make sure that you make 25 copies? Give it to the committee and make sure council gets it as well, okay?
Absolutely. I apologize.
And then in the future, can we, when we have amendments, can we make sure that council has it, that is, Michelle has it, that everyone has it, okay? It's not just you. We need to figure this out. Thank you. It's.
Did we get, does the amendment office give the copies to us
No.
or the committee?
No, they give it to you, to your office, and you have to make sure the committee gets it.
Okay.
Because they're confidential up until the point you release them, which is why we're having a hard time
Okay.
uploading it when we get it, because it has to really come from you. If you recall, when we were here in person, we used to just bring the amendment and give it to everyone. Now it's not that way. So I need you to get the 25 copies to Michelle and make sure that
The old fashioned way by Xerox.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So the bill, as we would amend it, would in effect restore the previous standard that had been for more than 2 decades, the standard under both state law and federal law. And that is that in awarding or disposing of financial incentives that would be made available, the standard would be that information would be made available upon request through the Public Information Act, unless making it public would result in a substantial competitive harm for the private entity that would benefit from the public disclosure. So, and that standard is the prior, my best understanding is that is the prior standard under the Public Information Act until this Supreme Court decision, which then led our judiciary to reinterpret our act in light of because they are so similar, both the federal and the state law. So that is what the bill with the amendment, the promised amendment, would do, and would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
You're welcome, Delegate. Next, please.
Dear esteemed members of the committee, my name is Taya Graham, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 712. As my colleague Stephen Janis will note, we investigated TIFs and pilots for 5 years, only to have our MPIA requests fulfilled incomplete, denied, or simply ignored. And I think my colleague would concur that in the case of not releasing information to the public, in truth, it should be the non-disclosure that must be justified. Transparency, the disclosure of information should always err on the side of public interest. The public's interest and the right of taxpayers to know how monies they provide are dispersed into various programs or private entities should be the priority. And I would assert that if these public-private partnerships are as profitable and beneficial as many have claimed, then permit us to validate the details. I've entertained the argument that revealing details of the public-private partnerships with our city could cause harm, but I would argue that revealing the success of the profit sharing would only encourage greater public accommodation of these tax subsidies, not less. And perhaps you might remember when Port Covington, now Baltimore Peninsula, when that TIF was being negotiated. It was the largest TIF issued in our state and one of the largest in the country. And hundreds of Baltimore residents flooded City Hall during the hottest days of summer in the hopes of understanding how these future tax revenues were being estimated, how they would be used, and how they would benefit residents. And a great deal of the reason that residents left dissatisfied was not only knowing that their questions would remain unanswered, but that they had no recourse. So when the ABLE Foundation filed a request for similar information to uncover the results of a public-private partnership, they had lawyers and expertise on their hands, and after 4 years, they still found themselves empty-handed. These corporations' dealings with our city remain cloaked in secrecy and shielded from scrutiny, which does not necessarily indicate wrongdoing, but it breeds concern. But this is something you can remedy. And I think most Baltimore residents would agree that if you choose to receive a tax subsidy and receive the unique privilege of deferring property taxes using a pilot or TIF, which Baltimore homeowners do not have the option for, then you must be subject to a different level of scrutiny. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, please.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Stephen Janis, and I'm a reporter for the Real News Network. Myself and my reporting partner, Taya Graham, support HB 712 and the changes to the Maryland Public Information Act. We believe this bill is vitally important because it focuses on transparency for a specific area of governance that receives less scrutiny than it deserves, namely public funding of private development. Both of us spent 5 years documenting the use of tax subsidies to spur development in Baltimore. It is a topic that is vexing enough without impediments to disclosure, but we found obstacles at every turn, including our attempt to put a price tag on the public subsidies for the development known as Harbor East. Harbor East was also the focus of the MPIA request, and the subsequent lawsuit ruling this bill is designed to address by the ABLE Foundation. We will release our reporting on Harbor East shortly, but needless to say, calculating the total value of the tax breaks afforded to developers of Harbor East is nearly impossible for reporters, and it should not be. Neither myself or Taya are weighing in on the merits of this policy specifically. What concerns us is that while all these assorted incentives and subsidies represent a massive investment by the taxpayers of Baltimore, they occur under a shroud of mystery without requisite disclosure. Information, incidentally, that is routinely provided to when investors are asked to sink money into a project. In fact, the taxpayers of Baltimore have been forced to forego tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, in tax revenues for the prospect of new development without the benefit of a fulsome accounting and accountability. Thus, the question at the heart of this bill, excuse me, and the ABLE Foundation's push for transparency is, what do the investors, meaning the taxpayers and residents of Baltimore, deserve to know? How should they evaluate their investment, so to speak, if the court in this case adopts a controversial precedent to literally obscure the critical fiscal details? Certainly the terms of the disposition of tax breaks afforded to the former Legg Mason building that still remain in part secret should be public, because simply put, the public funded. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good timing.
Oh, sorry.
Rebecca Snyder.
Do you want to switch seats?
Yeah, I can just grab.
Just move that a little bit closer.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry.
Sorry. Good afternoon, committee. My name is Rebecca Snyder, the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. I am delighted to be here in support of House Bill 712. Delegate Rosenberg's bill tightens up one of the exemptions in the Public Information Act. So as I'm sure the panel has shared, Public Information Act is designed so that the public, residents or anyone really can have access to information about government actions that affect them. However, the big downside of the Public Information Act is that it has a ton of exemptions. And some of them are, you know, obviously appropriate around things like privacy, things like making sure that trade secrets are taken care of, deliberate exemptions and so forth. But this exemption is really broad, the trade secret exemption, and we feel like it's been exploited. You've heard from other panelists about TIF financing, how these deals are kind of done in the dark. And it's very difficult for taxpayers and the public to understand what's going on if they don't have access to information. So this bill, I think by creating language about substantial competitive harm, makes sure that there's still, when you're down to the mat and it is a trade secret, it is something that's going to really affect your business, fine, it can be shielded. But otherwise, it needs to be public if you're using taxpayer dollars. And so we wholeheartedly support this bill and thank Delegate Rosenberg for bringing it and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for this panel? Shocked. I have a question. So how do you anticipate and who is deciding what is, and the language is, likely to result in substantial competitive harm? Is that a legal term of art? And then who decides that?
Well, ultimately, if initially, it would be the local government. But then if you objected to their decision, you could go to court. And so then it would be either the trial court, or if you had the resources, the time, the importance, it would go to the appellate courts. And that's what happened. No, it only went to the trial court here.
So under this bill, a local government could still say that's a trade secret, and it would be incumbent on the requester to take it to the next level.
Correct. As is the case with any appeal of almost all the time, because we just had the previous bill, you can appeal a decision by the executive branch to the judiciary for determination, was the decision by the executive branch consistent with the law?
Great, thank you. Any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you very much, Delegate. Thank you, panel, for your patience and your testimony today.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to call an unfavorable panel, and that is Robert Enton and Marta Harding. I don't see Bob in the audience, Marta.
I will be very brief. Marta Harding, I'm here on behalf of State Farm. We had signed in opposed to the bill because as originally introduced, it was much broader than what Delegate Rosenberg described and applied to all sorts of agencies, including the Insurance Administration, where insurance companies make confidential filings. So we were concerned. But with the amendments, we're comfortable that the bill doesn't raise those concerns. So we withdraw our opposition based on those amendments.
So are you taking a position or just withdrawing?
We become neutral with
Neutral.
the amendment that, and I think I've seen the language that Delegate Rosenberg has talked about.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 712. And we will move to House Bill 499, Delegate Bagnell. And Delegate Bagnell, your panel is Deborah Carty virtually, Tim Perry. Is Tim part of your panel, Delegate?
Yes.
Danielle Varanian, are those part of your panel?
I believe it's just Deborah Carty.
Just Deborah.
Tim Perry is here with information.
Okay, all right, thank you. Tim Perry, Daniel Varanian, do you want to go up to the table in the event that there are questions?
Okay. This way.
Okay, thank you. Delegate, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And members of the Health and Government Operations Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Heather Bagnall, District 33C, Anne Arundel County, here on behalf of House Bill 499, Health Occupations, Private Dental Offices Infection Control. You have my written testimony, so I will quickly summarize. Our former colleague in this committee used to say, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Dental infection control is everyone's business. And under current law, dentists who put patients at great risk of infection by violating infection control protocol are subject to disciplinary action from the Board of Dental Examiners. When a protocol is broken, easily attributed to a certain dentist in an office, the board has a clear line of accountability. But what happens when the inefficiency isn't a scope of practice, but with the physical practice itself? Who should the board discipline if a dental facility's pipes or the machines are faulty? It isn't rhetorical, it has happened. And when the examiners asked who was responsible, the response was, we don't know. So what does the board do? Well, without House Bill 499, they have to bring everyone in the practice into the investigation, which is neither efficient nor fair. House Bill 499 offers a solution by requiring a supervising dentist for dental offices be registered with the board. This dentist will be responsible for broad-scale infection control infractions in a given office when those infractions are structural in nature, creating a clear point of accountability in instances where structural deficiencies in an office contributed to infection control violations. Having such accountability is vital in addressing adverse practices to ensure infection control concerns are rectified quickly, fully, and efficiently. Now, you will hear from stakeholders that the bill as written is too broad for the intended scope, and we agree. We had a very productive meeting with stakeholders and our Senate partner late last week, and we are actively looking at how best to narrow the scope of the bill to ensure that the impact of the bill remains limited to creating accountability for office scale infection control infractions. And in fact, the Senate bill is also ongoing right now. So we're actively working with our Senate partner, Vice Chair Klossmeyer. Creating clearer accountability and infection control will assist in quickly correcting deficiencies and aid in the protection of our constituents. This bill has no fiscal impact. I understand that I have homework, and I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 499.
Thank you, Delegate. So you both are here for information. Did you?
Yeah, we
testify?
stand up in that capacity because, as Delegate Bagnall said, she has hosted several meetings that we participated in towards an amendment. The amendment's not done, so we have not reviewed it. And I think without the amendment conversations with the bills introduced, we would have signed up unfavorably. But because the amendment process is ongoing and the delegate is included in this, and that we signed up as information only. I am Tim Perry. I represent the Association of Dental Service Organizations. ADSO in Maryland represents 9 companies comprising 120 offices and about 16 counties in Baltimore City throughout the state. They represent 800 dentists and dental professionals, hygienists. They see about 800,000 patients on an annual basis, and we appreciate your consideration. I'm going to ask at this time if I can turn it to my co-counsel, Danielle Varanian. Danielle practices extensively in front of the board and has a very good understanding of how the bill and what it's purporting to get to relates to existing law. And those have been those conversations, that relationship between the bill and existing law has been part of the ongoing dialogue that we've had with the bill sponsor here, but also in the Senate. So we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Varanian?
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Varanian. I'm an attorney who represents the Association of Dental Support Organizations. And I also do represent dentists before the Maryland State Board of Dental Examiners. The bill as currently written, we have some significant concerns about because number one, at this moment, we don't believe that the bill is necessary because as the delegate stated, every licensee in the state is currently responsible for compliance with OSHA and CDC guidelines. So to the extent that there is an issue with the water lines or the autoclave or something like that, the buck stops with the dentist that is in the office that day. So there doesn't necessarily need to be a supervising dentist. And to my mind, we also represent physicians. There are physician practices that have multiple geographic locations. There's no such requirement in the Physician Practice Act that there be a supervising physician at one of those practices or to oversee 3 of those practices, as is suggested in this bill, because that requirement is not necessary because every licensee is responsible for that compliance. Point number 2 is that we have concerns that this will have an impact on access to care. Many DSO supported practices are in healthcare deserts. If you have a requirement that there be only 3 offices in close enough geographic proximity that the supervising dentist directly supervise them, we're concerned that those practices that are in those more remote areas will close. Finally, we did have productive discussions with the delegate and the board as well. And it's our understanding that this is modeled off of the mortician part of the code of health occupation. And if I may, delegate, just finish that point. I believe that that's where they got the 3 offices from. And I also believe that that's where they got the supervising dentist from. But under the section of the statute that speaks to the morticians, what they were doing there was creating a specific licensee for the facility itself for morticians. That's different than here. We're not trying, the dental board is not trying to create a license for the facility itself. So it's sort of jamming a square peg into a round hole. So we would just ask that we be given the opportunity to review the amendments, and that's why we're here for informational purposes.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to go to our virtual witness. That's Deborah Carty. Deborah,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 499. My name is Deborah Carty. I'm a registered dental hygienist and an appointed member of the Maryland State Board of Dental Examiners, speaking on behalf of the board. This legislation attempts to require each dental office to designate a licensed supervising dentist with authority and responsibilities for maintaining the office's overall infection control program. Some of the more common and most serious complaints that the board receives about dentists are allegations of dirty or unsanitary dental offices. These complaints are often initiated by dental patients. Upon receipt of these complaints, the board often assigns outside experts in the field of infection control to conduct an unannounced inspection. In most cases, the dentist against whom the board received the complaint is the owner and operator and is present during the inspection. However, there have been situations where the owner dentist is not present and there is no dentist specified ultimately responsible for enforcing infection control. These violations include failing to maintain and adequately test autoclave equipment to ensure instrument sterilization, or failure to take adequate measures for water line maintenance, water lines that are used to deliver water directly into a patient's mouth. Furthermore, the board has been advised by some non-owner dentists or employees in the situation, in their offices, there's a lack of adequate personal protective equipment like gloves, masks, lab coats, but as employees, they are not authorized to place orders. The dental board asserts that legislative change is needed to close this loophole and increase accountability. The board anticipates no change for the initial registration, no fee for that initial registration. However, there could be a small fee of about $10 that could apply if there is a change of registration. I'd like to thank Delegate Bagnall for sponsoring this bill. The board requests a favorable report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. So I'm going to open it up for questions from the committee. Are there any questions for these witnesses? Okay. See, do you have a question? Okay. Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. And Delegate, I did hear, I was in the back and I could hear the testimony for all of you that you're working on the amendments and that everyone is at the table, correct?
Yes.
All right, if you can make sure you do that, that would be great. I know you do it really well. And that would include also our next witness as well, if you can include everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. You have a great day. Next, we have an unfavorable panel, and that is Caitlin McDonough. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Caitlin McDonough on behalf of Benefis and the 9 Medicaid-focused practices that we support in the state. I am signed up unfavorably. I have been involved in the discussions with the sponsors about the amendment. It could be favorable with the amendment or informational was new to me. But so thank you for having me today. And most of our concerns have already been articulated by the previous panel. I would say in the Medicaid dental space specifically, and I know Vice Chair Carlson's very familiar with this, we cannot bill or get reimbursed for anything that is not a direct service. So for personal protective equipment, infection services, we have to comply with all of those things along with our Medicaid requirements and our other standard dental requirements, but we cannot be reimbursed for them. Our concern that the bill as drafted, we would almost have to assign a dentist to some of our practices to solely do infection control. Often which day-to-day is done by hygienist, assistant, a DSO, or some kind of non-clinical support. We do believe that the owner dentist or the dentist on premise, depending on the nature of the violation, should ultimately be responsible for that violation. And I understand that's who the board regulates, but a lot of the work is done by non-dentists. And if we have to have a dentist doing all of this, it's going to increase our costs substantially in a way that we cannot be reimbursed for. So happy to work with the sponsors on both sides. I think we're getting close to a solution that would allow some flexibility there, but appreciate the time today and happy to answer any questions.
And thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. We look forward to seeing a resolution. Thank you so much. This actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 499. And for our committee, the last bill of the day, it is House Bill 786, Delegate Bagnall, Health Occupations, Limited License to Practice Dentistry Services for Adults. Will you be so kind and come up with the following people? Michael Patty, Luciola Lambruschini, and Saliam Alborn. That's your favorable panel. And I have Dr. Abeck as favorable with amendment. Will you go ahead?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Health and Government Operations Committee. Once again, for the record, I'm Delegate Heather Bagnall, District 33C, Anne Arundel County, here on behalf of House Bill 786, Health Occupations Limited License to Practice Dentistry Services for Adults, a bill I am proud to champion with my Senate sponsor, Senator McKay, who this committee is very familiar with, is a big proponent of dental access. You have my written testimony, so I will quickly summarize. Oral health is an essential component of public health, and lack of access to dental care can lead to significant health issues across communities. This is part of my dental access package, which looks to modernize our programs to attract and retain oral health providers and to better align our programs with the needs of our Maryland constituents. There is a critical shortage of dental professionals, hindering access to dental care in large swaths of our state. In my written testimony, you will see a figure so staggering it bears repeating. Over 2 million Marylanders live in an area with a provider coverage ratio of 5,000 to 1 or more. This shortage is felt even more acutely in low-income and rural areas in which the dental care system is already strained. In these areas, federally qualified health centers, or FHQCs, provide dental care for those on Medicaid and Medicare for reduced fees. Under current law, the State Board of Dental Examiners can issue limited licensure for practitioners of pediatric dentistry. However, with the expansion of adult dental for our Medicaid population, we need to look beyond pediatric dentistry. House Bill 786 expands the authority of the board to grant limited licensure to dentists in all fields by removing the statutory limitation that requires licensees to practice pediatric dentistry. Additionally, the bill adds FQHCs to the list of entities that can request a waiver on behalf of potential employees. In doing so, House Bill 786 will increase the pool of dentists who can practice supporting access across the state and allow FQHCs to continue their crucial work to care for our most vulnerable Marylanders. House Bill 786 is a solution to the issue of understaffing, providing essential dental care to the citizens of Maryland, especially where access is a significant barrier to care. This bill is budget neutral and is a part of our larger dental access effort. And for all these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 786.
Who's next?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of this bill. My name is Luciola Lambruschini, and I stand before you today to advocate for change. As an international trained dentist, I have faced hurdles, but I have also discovered a solution that can benefit many like me. Let me share my journey as an international trained dentist coming to the US and trying to get a license. When I just came, the rules in Maryland had changed, so I couldn't get a license to work here. So my overseas education, the rigorous, didn't align to this criteria. So I explored different options. So I found out that in Virginia, with 1 year of postgrad in dentistry, I was able to be eligible to get a license. Of course, I needed to take the National Board 1 and 2 at the time and the Regional Board, the NERB. So I embraced myself and applied to school, and I did 1 year of postgrad. And then with my postgrad, the test that I passed, I was able to get a Virginia general dentist license. And then I was able to hold my license, and it was the persistence. So I really consider a similar bridge for international trained dentists here in Maryland. Let's unlock the opportunity, break the silos, and ensure quality care for our communities. Let's create access to the Marylanders. Like everybody says, that oral health is overall health. So it's very important to create access, because I know there's a lot of FQHCs, like our delegate was mentioning, but there is the workforce, there is no people in there. So I think me, surprisingly, going to dental school here, it was very minimal, the training that I needed more. It was almost the same. It was just an opportunity to show my skills. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Next, please.
And Michael Patty up here today on behalf of the Maryland Community Health System, a network of federally qualified health centers across the state in support of House Bill 786. As you've already heard, this is a bill about access and pathways. So currently today, a limited license is awarded. A general license is only awarded to an internationally trained dentist that is on a pediatric specialty pathway. However, an individual can already practice with a limited license in a federally qualified health center. However, if they're doing anything other than pediatric care, they are not ever eligible for a general license. Obviously, there's a two-tier license system here that we're trying to also address. We're not removing any hurdles or barriers. We're just opening up that pipeline for those kind of dentists that that are internationally trained, that come here to go to school again for orthodontic care or just general dentistry, to give them a pathway from that limited license to that general license. And that's what the essence of what we're trying to do here in this bill. Over 20 years ago, when Medicaid was expanded to children, this law was updated to allow for this limited license to general license pathway. Obviously, recently with Medicaid expanding to adult dental coverage, we think that pathway should also be reflected in that and be expanded to those folks as well. As you heard, other states do it differently than Maryland, very differently. This just makes it more clear that if you want to do something else other than pediatric dentistry, you have a pathway as an internationally trained dentist in Maryland from a limited license, which limits to where you can practice, to supervision, to a general license, which is what most folks are most familiar with. So with that, we'd ask for a favorable report on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. You have someone else, Sally Ann Alborn. Is she here?
Unavailable today.
Okay. All right. So this will be the favorable panel. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Are there any questions for this panel? Seeing none. Vice Chair Collison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me just ask the question, because I don't know if it's right or not. is it possible that this goes two ways? So if you're trained in general dentistry, you could do pediatric dentistry?
Oh. Yeah, well, as a general dentist, you're trained to see pediatric patients, but there is a specialty to do pediatric. That's usually two-year program, residency program as a postgrad.
Sure. So then this bill just relates to those who have gone through that specialty training?
No, so right now, the current law is only for the current pathway from a limited license to a general license for internationally trained dentists is only eligible for those that are pediatric specialists. What this bill does is removes that specificity and allows an internationally trained individual to focus on something else and still, at the end of the day, be eligible to apply for that general unrestricted license.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Delegate Rosenberg.
Are you talking with the opponents to the bill to see if there's some room for compromise, or is that it's not?
To my knowledge, there's only one group that had an amendment. I think the amendment is
They're coming next.
is from our perspective, the amendment is in spirit of what we're trying to accomplish, but it's hyper focused on one program from one dental school, as opposed to there's other programs that we think folks should be eligible to take and eventually be able to apply for that general license. I think we need to talk about some of the terminology that's being used in the current law that we need to still talk about.
Any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony today. Again, the next panel is favorable with amendment. And may I please have Dr. Thomas Beck and Daniel Doherty. Beck. How are you, doctor?
I am fine, and you?
We're doing well. Thank you for
Good.
asking.
I left a message for you.
I did.
Personal message.
I got it.
Okay.
Thank
just
you.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, I'm Dan Doherty here on behalf of the Maryland State Dental Association supporting House Bill 786, but with what I view as a technical amendment. As the prior witnesses said about 10 years or more ago, the current law was passed to allow what was termed in the statute foreign trained dentists. The terminology now is internationally trained dentists, to have a different pathway than the onerous one that exists elsewhere in the statute, to get a 2-year pediatric residency or to have completed that and worked for 2 years in a public health clinic. We did not have adult Medicaid at that point in time. Now we do. And this bill is intended to bring that under that umbrella. Now, the pediatric can only do the residency through the University of Maryland. The bill as drafted would have an authorization for anyone who completes a, what's the terminology? Completes the program for pediatrics at the University of Maryland or any other program. Well, there is no other program that's like pediatric. The dean of the dental school had indicated that the terminology should be what's contained in our amendment, and that is successfully completed an advanced education in dentistry 2-year residency at the University of Maryland School of Dentistry. So we have submitted that technical amendment. You're talking basically about general dentists treating adults and children, and pediatric dentists treating children. So we think this accomplishes the purpose. We think it provides access to care, and we would urge you to adopt the amendment and give it a favorable report.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of HGO. I'm Dr. Tom Beckett. I'm the Vice Chair of our Maryland State Dental Association Legislative Committee, and also happen to be past president of the MSDA, and I am now the current president of our Charitable and Educational Foundation. And it's through that foundation that I understand the need for the access to care. My foundation provides large mom projects. We're doing one in Salisbury in September. You're all welcome to come. We do mini moms now in large private dental offices to fill in the void. But with this background, I'm acutely aware of the pressing needs. So that's why I'm in support of House Bill 786. This legislation can encourage internationally trained professionals to attend the University of Maryland to advance their knowledge and skill set. And then it's a win-win. They go to these federally qualified health centers. They might establish a route in that locale and stay. There are many dental deserts within the state of Maryland, as you heard earlier, and that's my favorite term, dental desert. And for you who don't know, it's not just in Western Maryland or the Eastern Shore. Baltimore City and Baltimore County have dental deserts, and it's not just for the underserved. So with the technical amendment, I offer for you to have a favorable report for House Bill 786. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you so much. And I will say continue to work with the sponsor, please.
We will.
Okay, so this actually concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 786. Can I ask the members to stay, once we go down, stay on the chairs for just a second? Thank you. And thank you everyone for being with us today. You will come down.